The cafeteria erupted in laughter, a cruel, jagged sound that sliced through the air like broken glass. In the center of it all was Mia, her cheeks burning red, her hands gripping the edges of her wheelchair's armrests, as if they could anchor her against the storm. The tray of food she'd carefully balanced on her lap was now a mess of mashed potatoes and spilled juice, splattered across the floor. Above her, 3 boys towered, their smirks sharp as knives. One of them, the leader, kicked the wheel of her chair, sending it spinning slightly to the side. "Oops," he said, voice dripping with mockery. "Guess your fancy chair couldn't handle lunch." The crowd laughed harder, and Mia's heart sank into a cold, heavy knot. She was used to stares, whispers, even pity, but this was different. This was a public dismantling, and she felt every piece of herself breaking with her chair. Mia was 16, a sophomore at Lincoln High, a school that prided itself on inclusivity, but often forgot what that meant. Born with cerebral palsy, she navigated the world from her wheelchair, a custom-built model her family had saved years to afford. It wasn't just a tool for mobility. It was her independence, her way of claiming space in a world that often tried to shrink her. At home, she was a firecracker, quick-witted, with a laugh that could light up a room. But at school, she was quieter, her confidence chipped away by the subtle and not-so-subtle ways her peers reminded her she was different. The cafeteria incident wasn't the first time she'd faced cruelty, but it was the worst. The boys, Jake, Ryan, and Carter, were seniors, popular enough to wield their status like a weapon. They'd targeted Mia before with snide comments or exaggerated apologies when they accidentally blocked her path. Today, though, they'd crossed a line. They'd taken a wrench from the shop class and loosened the bolts on her chair's frame during lunch, watching with glee as it wobbled and collapsed under her weight. Mia's hands shook as she tried to wipe the juice from her jeans. She wanted to scream, to disappear, to be anywhere but here. The cafeteria monitor, Mrs. Grayson, was at the far end of the room, distracted by a spilled milk incident. No one stepped forward to help. A few kids averted their eyes, guilt flickering across their faces, but most just watched, some filming on their phones. Mia's best friend, Lila, wasn't there. She had a math test to retake during lunch. Mia was alone, and the weight of that loneliness was heavier than the chair itself. The bell rang, and the crowd dispersed, leaving Mia with a broken chair and a heart full of shame. She managed to call her mom, who worked 2 towns over as a nurse and couldn't leave her shift. Her dad was on a construction site, unreachable. There was only one person she could call, her older brother, Ethan, a Marine stationed at a base 2 hours away. Ethan had always been her protector, her hero. When she was little, he'd carry her on his shoulders, pretending she was flying. When kids at the park stared, he'd stare back, his presence enough to silence any whispers. But Ethan had been gone for months, deployed, and then stationed stateside, and Mia hadn't seen him since Christmas. She hesitated, her thumb hovering over his number, but the thought of navigating the rest of the school day with a broken chair was too much. She dialed. Ethan answered on the second ring, his voice warm but edged with concern. "Mia? You okay?" She tried to keep her voice steady, but the moment she said, "They broke my chair," the tears came. She told him everything. The boys, the laughter, the way no one helped. Ethan's silence on the other end was heavy, the kind that promised action. "I'm coming," he said simply. "Stay with someone you trust until I get there." Mia waited in the nurse's office, her chair propped against the wall, its frame bent and unusable. The nurse, Miss Carter, was kind but overwhelmed, muttering about budget cuts and outdated equipment as she offered Mia a creaky loaner chair from the storage closet. Mia nodded, numb, her mind replaying the cafeteria scene. She felt small, exposed, like the world had seen her at her weakest and laughed. Lila arrived after her test, her face crumpling when she saw Mia. "Why didn't you text me?" she demanded, hugging her friend tightly. Mia shrugged, unable to explain the paralyzing shame that had kept her silent. Ethan arrived just after third period, his Marine uniform crisp, his jaw set like stone. At 24, he was tall and broad, his presence commanding without effort. The school office buzzed with whispers as he signed in, his boots echoing on the linoleum. Mia's heart lifted when she saw him, but it sank again when she realized what his presence meant. This was bigger than she'd wanted it to be. Ethan knelt beside her, his eyes searching hers. "You okay, kid?" he asked softly. She nodded, though her throat was tight. He didn't push her to talk. Instead, he wheeled her to the principal's office, his hand steady on her shoulder. Principal Harris was a nervous man, quick to offer apologies but slow to act. He assured Ethan that the school would investigate the incident, but his tone suggested it would be swept under the rug. Ethan wasn't having it. "My sister was humiliated in front of half the school," he said, his voice low but unyielding. "Her chair, her lifeline, was sabotaged. You're telling me you'll look into it?" "That's not good enough." He demanded to know what would happen to the boys responsible. Harris stammered about due process, about needing evidence. Ethan's eyes narrowed. "You've got a room full of witnesses and probably a dozen videos on kids' phones. Find them." The investigation moved faster after that. By the end of the day, Jake, Ryan, and Carter were called to the office. They denied everything at first, claiming it was just a prank, and that Mia's chair must have been faulty. But the videos surfaced, passed from student to student until one reached the principal. The footage was damning. Jake loosening the bolts, Ryan laughing as he recorded, Carter shoving the chair to make it wobble. The boys were suspended, pending a disciplinary hearing, but Mia knew suspensions wouldn't change their hearts. They'd be back, and the stares, the whispers, would only get worse. Ethan stayed in town for the week, taking leave to be with Mia. He fixed her chair with help from a mechanic friend, but the real repair work was emotional. Mia was quiet, retreating into herself. She stopped joking, stopped smiling. Lila tried to cheer her up with silly memes and late-night talks, but Mia's confidence was shattered. She felt like a target, like her disability was a spotlight she couldn't escape. Ethan saw it, and it broke his heart. He'd fought in war zones, faced enemies with guns, but nothing scared him more than seeing his sister lose her spark. The challenge wasn't just the bullies. It was the school's culture, the way it enabled cruelty through indifference. Ethan met with teachers, counselors, even the school board, pushing for anti-bullying programs and better accessibility training. He spoke with a calm intensity that made people listen, but progress was slow. Mia, meanwhile, faced her own battles. She dreaded going back to school, knowing the whispers would follow her. Lila suggested she start a blog to share her story, but Mia wasn't ready to be that vulnerable. "What if they just laugh harder?" she asked one night, her voice small. Ethan didn't have all the answers, but he had resolve. He organized a meeting with the parents of the suspended boys, mediated by the school counselor. It was tense. Jake's dad was defensive, insisting his son was just being a kid, while Ryan's mom was silent, ashamed. Carter's parents were the only ones to apologize sincerely, promising to make him face consequences at home. Ethan didn't care about their excuses. He wanted them to understand the weight of what their sons had done. "Mia's not just a kid in a chair," he said. "She's a person. Your kids tried to take that from her." Back at school, Mia faced the challenge of reclaiming her space. The first day after the incident, she wheeled into the cafeteria with Ethan by her side, his uniform a silent warning. The room went quiet, and for the first time, Mia didn't feel invisible. She felt seen, but not in the way she'd feared. A few kids approached her later, apologizing for not stepping in. One girl, Sarah, admitted she'd been too scared to say anything but wished she had. It wasn't much, but it was a start. The real turning point came when Mia decided to speak at a school assembly. Ethan had been invited to talk about resilience, drawing on his Marine experience, but he suggested Mia share her story instead. She was terrified. Public speaking was hard enough without a room full of peers who'd seen her at her lowest. But Ethan's belief in her was unshakable. "You're stronger than you know," he told her. "Show them who you are." The assembly was held in the gym, the bleachers packed. Mia's hands shook as she wheeled to the microphone, but she took a deep breath and began. She didn't talk about the chair or the bullies directly. Instead, she talked about what it felt like to be seen as less, to fight for every inch of respect. She spoke of her dreams, to study engineering, to design better mobility devices, to prove that disability didn't define her. Her voice grew steadier, and the gym grew quieter. When she finished, there was a moment of silence, then applause, not pitying, but real. Jake, Ryan, and Carter were there. Their suspensions lifted, but their reputations tarnished. Mia didn't look at them. She didn't need to. The assembly sparked change. Students started a peer-led group to address bullying, and the school board approved funding for accessibility